Today we have several NHL news and rumors from around the league talking about teams like the Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, Nashville Predators, Tampa Bay Lightning, and the St. Louis Blues. And we also have the latest updates on the 2021 NHL season and if we're going to have one. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of teams we're talking about today. A variety of news and rumors focusing on the futures of some teams and their players. Let's kick things off with the Montreal Canadiens. I've come across some articles here kind of looking at the future of the Habs and whether or not they can afford to extend a couple of players who are going to be pending UFAs after the coming year, and that's forwards Thomas Tatar and Phillip Deneau. Now, we've talked about the future of Deneau a few times here on the channel. Of course, there was some uncertainty whether or not he wanted to stick around in Montreal. But based on how this offseason has gone and a couple of interviews with him, I do believe he would like to stay and find a fit to become a long-term Montreal Canadian and kind of finish out at least his prime years of his NHL career. Now, in the case of Thomas Tatar, it's really a lot of unknowns. We haven't really heard from the player exactly. But the Habs spent a lot of money this offseason. They made a lot of commitments to a lot of other players. So it's going to kind of force their hand here that with what they have coming up for some pending UFAs in the next year or two, they are going to be in a position that they just might not be able to keep everybody. I mean, they spent a lot of money on players like Josh Anderson and Tyler Toffoli within the forward group. They gave a pretty good, healthy extension to Jeff Petrie. They brought in Jake Allen and then extended him. Brought in Joel Edmondson on defense. There's a lot of moves. And for the most part, I think they were good moves, but that's still tied up a lot of money in 808 and a lot of cap space that Marc Bergevin and the Habs have been kind of hoarding here over the past couple of years, while trying to find the right players to use that space on. Now, the other thing that the Habs, of course, need to be cognizant of, and I'm sure they are, is that they have some young players like Nick Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi who are going to be coming out of their ELCs in the next year or two as well, and are going to be needing extensions. And the way Suzuki's going especially, I think he'll be getting a pretty sizable raise. Kotkaniemi could be as well. It kind of depends on how the next year goes, but certainly showed some progress during the return to play for sure. So obviously that poses some question marks. So guys like Tatar and Deneau are mostly the ones coming up the soonest here that we have to question. Now, one thing that the Habs could do, in the article I came across, suggested that maybe they do look to consider trading someone inconsistent forward, Jonathan Juran, who for the most part of his time in Montreal, you can say, hasn't worked out the best. I mean, he's had his times, though, in Montreal where he's been a productive player. For example, the first year Max Domi was there, he and Domi had pretty good chemistry, put up some decent numbers, but he has been inconsistent. They thought he was going to be a center, turned out to be a winger, and, for the most part here, he hasn't been terrible by any means, but considering he's been their highest paid forward for a while and continues to be, there's certainly some uncertainty, I think it's fair to say, over his future. Now, another thing to keep in mind as well, if the Habs wanted to consider trading Juran, now would be the time to do it, or at least sometime during the next season before next year kicks in. Once we're into the next fiscal year and the next season rolls around, Juran is going to have a form of a no-trade clause, or the final 2 years of his contract, whereas right now he doesn't have any trade protection. So anytime between now and the end of the next season would be the proper time to make a move if it's going to happen. Now, I think between Tatar and Deneau, I think Deneau is the more important player to keep. He's a really solid two-way center. He's really evolved, and I think long-term he very well could be the number 3 center on his team. But a lot of that, to me, really boils down to the progression of Kotkaniemi. I think Suzuki is really, a step ahead as far as his progress goes and being more consistent. I can see Suzuki being a number 1 center in the very near future on a consistent basis, whereas right now, you can say between Deneau and Suzuki, they can kind of rotate between that position. One could be 1, one could be 2, or a 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it. And Kotkaniemi probably slots into the number 3 spot for the coming year. And it just really boils down to if he excels and progresses and develops enough to really going to move up with Suzuki to show they can handle the 1-2 responsibility and kind of bump Deneau down. I'm not entirely convinced that is the case here as of yet. So I think a lot of Deneau's future is also going to depend on Kotkaniemi's development, because if his development doesn't take big steps forward this year, his need to the team and how much they need him and rely on him is going to be that much more, and would be that much more of a loss if they were to lose him. So I think at that point, they will do what they had to do to keep Phillip Deneau, if possible, and I think Deneau would be retained over Tatar. I mean, they had some pretty good times with Tatar. He's been a pretty good, effective scoring forward for them. I'm not suggesting that he needs to go, but I think if the Habs want to retain him and Deneau, and I think it would be wise if they were able to, I would pick those two to stay over Juran, but that's just my opinion. I'm not sure what you guys think, especially if you're a Montreal fan. Let me know down in the comments. Do you think it's possible that Juran would be traded in an effort to make enough space to kind of retain Deneau or Tatar here, as well as the entry-level deals that are going to be expiring for guys like Suzuki and Kotkaniemi? I mean, they need to find some space a couple years down the road here, and he might be a guy to move out to kind of help make that happen. I mean, if you look around the other parts of the team, like on the blue line, goaltending, it's probably not a lot of options there to really make any kind of significant room. I mean, so there you have it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. Now on to the Maple Leafs, where we saw an article through The Athletic with James Myrtle and Jonas Seigel talking about the future of their three pending unrestricted free agents as well, who need new deals within the next year. You're looking at Freddie Anderson in goal, Zach Hyman in forward group, and Morgan Rielly on defense. Now, of course, we know the Leafs have a lot of money tied up amongst their big four forwards, and as we know, that they're going to be in a position now with a flat cap. I mean, the Leafs wouldn't have certainly banked on this happening by any means. Of course, they have, like most teams, the guys that are kind of run the capologists, as they usually call them, where they factor in a lot of progressions and increases year after year, where they can kind of project out what they can spend and not spend. And clearly this is going to impact a lot of teams, but the teams tightest against the cap will certainly have the biggest impact. Now, of course, we talked before at length earlier in the offseason about the uncertain future of Freddie Anderson and a potential trade that never really materialized. I think the Leafs did look around and consider it, but there was really no means to really upgrade the position, so therefore they backed off, and I think they're going to take a wait-and-see approach with Anderson for the coming year. If he starts off really good, I think they will consider extending him. If he starts off, so-so or okay, or just anything outside of phenomenal, I think they'll kind of hold off, and maybe they don't. When it comes to Hyman and Rielly, I think they would obviously want to retain both players if they can. Zach Hyman's proved to be very reliable, has a lot of value though, and even though he's a hometown boy, he might take a hometown discount to some extent, but he's really hardworking. He's a well respected, well liked teammate, good in the locker room. Like, he's just a kind of that glue piece, that blue collar kind of player that really fits in with their other skilled players and is a nice complementary piece to the team. So I am sure that they would not want to lose his services, but at the same time, his value has kind of gone up a lot. Especially, I think he really played well this past year as well offensively. After missing time to start the year, he came back and put up some really good numbers. And you might have a situation where other teams might be able to outbid them for the players. Same goes for Morgan Rielly. I think ideally they'd like to get him locked up around $7 million. That's what the article here kind of goes on to discuss. That a longer-term deal in that $7 million range would be kind of where they see Rielly slotting in. And I think that's, preferably he's probably going to be the one who gets the most likelihood, I think, of getting the extension more than the other two. I think out of the three, he's probably the most valuable, by far their top offensive defenseman. So if they lost Morgan Rielly on the back end, that would be a big blow. But at the same time, losing Hyman up front, as much as it would be a blow, I don't think it would be as big as losing Rielly. And when it comes to Freddie Anderson, they do have means through free agency and trade that they can look to kind of go through the next starting goaltender and determine who that's going to be. It's very much possible that the Leafs are going to be in a position where all three of these guys don't return when their contracts are up. Now, obviously, as I said, there's not a lot of room, though, in Toronto to make a trade to free up space without really doing something drastic, and that would be moving one of the big four. And as I mentioned before, I think if any of those four are going to be moved, to me, I think it's going to be Nylander or Marner. Not to say that either is, there's no rumor saying that they're going to be traded. But for example, the other reason here that's going to be a wait-and-see approach for the Leafs on these extensions would be that they want to give these guys another year. And Dubas has made it clear that this Big Four has another season to really put their best foot forward to try to have some more success here before they consider changing things up a little bit more drastically. But if the Leafs don't have a good season, they have a bad regular season or another early playoff exit, I think we very well would be much more likely to see an exit here by a Marner or Nylander trade, which would then obviously free up a lot of cap space to possibly even keep all three of these guys as well. So let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are on these three pending free agents for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Which of the three are the most likely to leave and which are the most likely to stay? Let me know your thoughts down below and we'll discuss further. Now, one quick update here on St. Louis Blues defenseman Vince Dunn, restricted free agent. We're not likely going to get a contract anytime soon. It sounds like he's probably going to be signed right around the time the training camp starts, or even possibly closer to the start of the NHL season. As we know, the Blues are not opposed to taking their time with these, and I think they want to get camp started to see where they stand with guys like Tarasenko and Alex Steen, because they very well could use some long-term injury reserve cap relief, which could free up the necessary money to make sure that they get Dunn signed and any other moves they want to make here at the last minute. But of course, if these guys go on long-term injury reserve, they will be back later in the season, so they can't be tying up too much money for too long. But still, it sounds like a Dunn contract is not really all that close. There's still some dialogue going on between the two sides, but it looks as though training camp's likely going to open before we really get any news on that front. At least that's how things are sounding right now. Now, I came across another article as well. This is not a trade rumor by any means. It was just an idea that was written about the Tampa Bay Lightning possibly hooking up with the Nashville Predators. We know the Lightning are going to trade players. They've been a hot topic we've talked about here a fair bit in the past couple of weeks. And right now we've seen numerous more reliable sources linking the Lightning and Tyler Johnson specifically to a couple of teams. Now, one team that we haven't really heard much as far as actual rumors of being linked to, but does make sense based on the article I came across, would be the Nashville Predators. The Predators are a team that have a fair bit of cap space, so obviously that's important. They need to be able to take on the extra contract. They also are a team that moved on from a couple of centers in this offseason with guys like Kyle Turris and Nick Bonino moving on, so they could use the depth at the center position. Plus, Johnson can also be a winger depending on how else they want to structure their lineup here. But they have the space. They need some scoring. They need to rejig some things here. They were rumored to be in and could still be on a guy like Mike Hoffman. And to be honest, they could even possibly figure out a way to bring in Hoffman and trade for Johnson, depending on what else kind of is involved here. It is remotely possible they could do both. Obviously, the Lightning would need to add a sweetener to the Johnson deals we've talked about before. So maybe Johnson, along with a prospect and a pick, could get it done to the Predators. And I think he'd be a good fit there. I think it actually makes a lot of sense that they could very well be a team here to look to for a Tampa Bay Lightning trade. Now, whether it's Johnson or another piece that they could move out, like a Kaloran, for example, or Yanni Gourde, Andre Palat, or any of those guys that are potential trade pieces, I think the Predators make a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to the guys like Johnson that have a no-trade clause, hard to say for sure. I can't speak for him personally, but I know a lot of players really like Nashville. It's a popular spot around the NHL, of course, so I can see him maybe waving for them more than many of the other NHL locations as well if he has to leave Tampa. So let me know what your thoughts are on a potential Lightning Predators trade. Is that a deal that makes sense to you? Give me your mock trades down below. Now, as I mentioned as well, when it comes to the 2021 NHL season, the only reports and updates we have right now is that both sides, including the league and the Players Association, are engaging in more regular talks. There was a period, at least it seemed to be, of kind of a quietness, of not really much happening there for a few days last week, once the Players Association kind of got wind that the owners wanted to redo things and kind of increase the amount going to escrow and salary deferral. They were not happy, and things kind of really went quiet and dark there for a little bit, but apparently they are re-engaged, and there's been regular ongoing talks every day here for the past little bit, so that's encouraging. That's good news. But now that tomorrow's December 1st, to be honest, I think we're slipping away. That January 1st start time is getting to the point where it's pretty unlikely, and we're getting to the point as well that the players may not want to have training camps before the Christmas holidays. If you think about it, you're going to need a couple of weeks. Even if they come to an agreement tomorrow, for example, which is unlikely, we're going to have a situation where they need to have at least a 2-week period, probably a little bit more, probably 17, 18 days before you can open training camps, because players are going to need time to arrive from all the different places that they go to. They may have to quarantine for 2 weeks depending on where they're at and where they're traveling to, and that could pose an issue. So you're not going to open a training camp up on December the 18th, for example, when the Christmas holidays are so close. They probably would just say, we want to wait, or either that or you open camps, and then you for maybe 3 or 4 days or 5 days or whatever, then you take a break for a couple days for Christmas and then go back. I mean, that's a possibility, but I think from the players' perspective, they're probably going to just want to start camps up maybe right after. They can go as early as Boxing Day or the 27th, start camps up, and then get ready from there to maybe start, say, January the 15th. Can you have preseason games? That's another thing, too, that we don't know. I know the 7 teams that didn't play in the return to play were rumored to be getting more preseason games if they were going to have them. So they haven't played in so long. It's really hard to say, but there's not a ton of progress at this point that we're aware of. But at least talks seem to be taking place more regularly, and we'll see what they can hammer out here, hopefully sooner than later. So let me know your thoughts and everything discussed today down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.